Um, the passion for learning has been lifelong for myself, and it will continue. The goal of tonight's session is really to introduce you to this particular boot camp and what courses are part of that boot camp, and to have an open discussion. So for example, when you are, seeing a particular slide and you think, oh, I have questions, I need to ask my question now, feel free to post it into the chat, and Yulia will let me know that there is a question and we'll address that right away. And of course, at the end, we can have questions as well, because as you're going along, I'm sure you'll think of things. So I don't want you to think that you can't, interact with me. I have been involved with technology for 25 years. I have had my own business. I've had two businesses in IT, and I've also worked for employers in IT. So I've always been intrigued by technology, and I've also been intrigued by behavior. So when you talk about data analytics, and I know some of you mentioned that you are either in finance or banking or what have you, retail, all of those involve some type of consumer behavior. Well, sure enough, psychology is very relevant when it comes to that. So you want to think about intersections between what you love, what you do, and data analytics, because they do marry well together. Okay, so don't think that you have to be, a pure tech geek like myself, or a nerd, proclaimed nerd, but it's okay if you are. So that's good. So tonight we're going to talk about what's involved with data analytics. We're going to talk about the difference between data analytics and other things like data science, because there is a difference. We'll talk about why data analytics is needed, why it's necessary, what the career opportunities are, what specific things the boot camp covers, and who is a good fit for data analytics career. Um, I think one of the most important things to remember is that if you see yourself as being capable of doing it, you will do it, right? Conversely, if you don't feel capable, then you want to surround yourself with people that can help you along the way. And really, that's what OpenHub does. It gets you connected to other individuals like yourself, and everyone learns. And it doesn't matter, how much education you have, you always can learn, and that's what's important. So, all right. So data analytics, why? What is going on with these terms, right? So a data analyst is someone who either is hired or starts a business to use data to generate insights for an organization. And the goal is to determine what data can tell us, what story can tell us, the data can tell us about a particular subject. So if it's finance, it might be finance related. If it's healthcare, it might be healthcare related. The data really is there to tell the story. So there are 4 different flavors of data analytics. And keep in mind that when we're talking data analytics and we're talking data science, both data analytics and science use these 4 types of data analytics, just so you understand that. So descriptive basically takes historical data and determines what happened or what's happening now. So if I wanted to analyze, my sales for my store, and I want to determine, how were sales, what happened, what's happening currently, I would use a descriptive approach to my process for analysis. Diagnostic uses historical data to determine what happened and why. Significant difference is why. It's okay to know that something happened, but knowing why is essential, because that allows you to then make decisions moving forward and really change your approach to, your business, your approach, your process, what have you. Predictive analytics is basically using historical data. Again, notice history is essential, right? Historical data to forecast possible future outcomes based on statistical models and machine learning. So again, we use that historical data to train a data set, right, and determine whether or not that data set can give us insights into possible future outcomes based on the model we develop and the machine learning algorithms that we throw at the model. And then prescriptive uses historical data to make recommendation for a course of action. Once we know something, we need to act on it. And making something actionable is essential, because that allows us to benefit from the insight that we've acquired. So one of the big pieces, I'm just going to interject really quick, is so many organizations have data that they don't use. There's something called, dark data. It's data that's there waiting to be looked at, waiting to be ascertained, and really that data could benefit, right, the organization. So the role of the data analytics individual, depending on whatever your level is to get that data out of its shell, get it out there so that we can learn from it. All right, so career opportunities. And I know some of you mentioned different industries that would benefit from a data analyst, but every industry needs a data analyst. Now, why do we care about data analysts versus data scientists? I consider myself to be both an analyst and a scientist. The reason I'm a scientist is because I also use research. I use a research approach to data analytics. So a data analytics individual is going to cost less for the organization. So you're not going to, when you hire a data analyst, you're not going to have to pay as much as a data scientist. So for an individual who is maybe changing careers, or perhaps dual degree types of individuals, you might step into data analytics first, and then down the road decide, I want to go to the next level and become a data scientist. Well, with that, you could command a higher wage, right? You could command a raise or a promotion or what have you. So you want to think about starting out small, going into data analytics, and then jumping into data science land if that's something that you like. Okay, so I see we have a question on the screen here. I'm going to quickly answer that. Thank you so much, Max, for your question. So is Power BI or Tableau required? If you have very little experience and you know Python, SQL, and Excel, that's fine. The goal of this boot camp is to assume that you don't have any experience. So if you do have experience in something, that means you can take an innovative approach to your learning. If let's say I go over things in the boot camp and you already know those things, you're going to take your specific project or approach to the case project and take it to the next level. All right, so I do cover every single thing that you mentioned there: Power BI, Tableau, Python, SQL, and Excel. But the goal would be for you to take your skill set wherever you're at to the next level, which would be perfectly fine. So I'm really glad that you asked that question, and thank you so much. That's a very common question. All right, so one of the things that World Economic Forum has put out there, and again, I'm sure the stats are new for this year coming because we're just starting a new year, is by 2022, 85% of companies will have adopted some kind of big data or analytics technology, and 96% of companies are seeking to hire new permanent staff. This is something that has become critical for businesses to stay afloat, for organizations to meet critical success factors, and for organizations to really meet the needs for their stakeholders, whatever that stakeholder pool is.
Cynthia,
So
before you go further, can you clarify, someone missed what's the difference
oh, sure,
between data
absolutely.
science versus data analytics?
Data analytics. Okay, so data analytics is basically applying those approaches that I showed you earlier, but not necessarily taking a science approach to it. So a data analytics individual will focus on the organization core values, the organization processes. They'll focus on very specific business and or organization dynamics, but they won't necessarily get into the empirical research side of things. They won't get involved in writing hypotheses and testing it using an empirical type of method. All right, a data scientist will take an approach like a true researcher and write hypotheses, apply theoretical frameworks and things of that nature. So they may approach the project. So for example, let's say it's a project related to COVID and understanding different comorbidities and COVID. They're going to take a scientific approach to that project, whereas a data analyst might focus on process, and they might focus on operations. They may focus on everything up to the empirical piece. All right, so I hope that answers your question. Excellent, excellent. I too participated in several predictive analytics projects for COVID, and working on a data set from Mexico. So that's something definitely is worth looking into. One of the things to remember too, and I'm just going to throw this in here because I think it's important to understand what drives you. I have worked on various projects, but I will find that cases that do social good are very rewarding for me. So for example, when COVID first hit and, they were seeking for scientists to look at data and help them make some semblance of that data, a lot of us got together online and we rallied to help provide some insight on some of the data that was coming in related to COVID. So if you find yourself, like that type of individual where you have to do something that helps society, this is a great area to get into. And again, your skill set can be, very beginner all the way on up to experienced. All right, I see we have Mark here. Mark, nice to see you. And you're a cost analyst. Excellent. My father was a cost accounting supervisor for Lockheed, and he did a lot of analytical processing as well. So that's kind of neat. Welcome. All right, so the skills that you need for the boot camp are here. You need to have an understanding of math and statistics. Now, I know that tends to scare people away. Don't worry, because what I do is, you have to remember I'm also a professor, so I understand that. And we get a lot of students from, different backgrounds who maybe they haven't been in high school for a long time and math scares you, or maybe you just hate math, and that's okay. What we do is we break down the logic and the computational aspects of the math, and we make sense of the math using real world applications. So it becomes less mysterious and more applied to what you see in daily life. Okay. So it's not a high level of math that you have to understand. And what I will give you is source code for all of the formulas, so you won't have to know those formulas. We plug them in and we talk about what the formulas mean and how they apply. So pattern recognition is another thing. Pattern recognition, when you look at a large data set or even a small data set, you're going to see over time, you're going to learn to recognize patterns. Those patterns could stand for problems with the data, problems with data integrity, or those patterns might be patterns of normalcy versus not normalcy, right? So as a programmer and as a data analyst, you want to make sure that you can recognize patterns. And for some folks, it takes a little time to train your eye, right? You might look at the data and say, I just see stuff. I see nothing but stuff. Or you might say, I see stuff and it doesn't look good. Well, that means you've picked up on abnormalities in the data, right? And you're at least able to find them and say, I see, interesting things in the data. You also want to be organized. Now, there's different methodologies with organizing your approach to data science and data analytics. You want to come up with something that works for you. And there's some best practices that I share with you in the boot camp. Communication skills is essential. This is something that, when you do get that insight, you need to be able to effectively communicate it using some type of reporting, visualizations, and things like that. So we talk about what are the best ways to approach communicating your ideas and what have you. We also talk about what does it mean to be on a team of data analytics folks, right? How do we communicate? And then the last things are Excel and SQL, Python, R, Tableau, and Power BI. So these are the skills that you need in the career, not for the boot camp. Does that make sense to everyone? So all these skills that are listed here are really for the career. This is what employers are looking for, but these are not skills that you need to take the boot camp or be part of it. You're going to acquire all these skills, and that's what's exciting about it. So any questions on the career opportunities? Does everyone understand that the intersection between, a given area, so retail, right? Retail and data analytics, healthcare and data analytics, finance and, data analytics, it's an intersection between one or more, or two or more areas, industry areas. Higher education also has the need for data analytics. Construction, agriculture, right? Nuclear power plants, right? Manufacturing, all of those areas need to be able to avail themselves to skilled folks who understand data analytics, okay? All right, great question. Jack, you ask, will there be scheduled office hours in order to cover content? Absolutely. Here's the thing, by having access to the instructor, which is myself, we can support you by either meeting at a time that's conducive for you, given your schedule, or coming up with a custom time that works best for you. I find that when you meet the student halfway, you're able to ask those questions in the way that you prefer, and it really helps you. So there will be scheduled office hours, and hopefully that answers that question. And then the second question, is data analytics a position that is highly available remotely? Absolutely. Absolutely. So as someone who has done this for 25 years, and also who is currently doing that, it's not going away. Now, the pandemic, of course, threw a curveball, right? And everyone kind of moved to the remote and they kind of pivoted in that direction. But you have to understand that geographically, you may not be in that same location where that organization needs your skills. So the remote dynamic in IT has been used for a while now. And now everyone is becoming more comfortable with it. Employers are seeing the benefit of not having to put you in an office, pay for those, the office space, pay for, all the artifacts that go with that. They allow you to telecommute. So that's a very, very good dynamic for many of us, especially if, with COVID and the situation and what have you. Plus it saves on, gas and things getting to work. So that's always a good thing. Is there certification upon completion? There is not a certification from myself. Yulia, if you want to speak to that, but before you do, I would like to say this. Anyone who does complete the boot camp, I've had students in the past ask for references, and if you successfully complete, I would be more than willing to give a reference for
This is the best
employees.
certificate ever, that's for sure.
Yes.
But we will
Okay.
we will issue the certificate from OpenHub.
Yes. Yeah.
It's our own certificates. It's not like any specific college or university.
Right.
But Cynthia is teaching in universities, in two
Yes.
universities actually, and writing curricula for that.
Yes.
Cynthia,
Yes.
we do have another question which we probably missed.
Absolutely.
Is it
Okay.
easy to get into analytics for a career change and
Ah,
no experience?
thank you. Thank you. It is very easy to get into analytics. And I will tell you this, there's a lot of individuals out there that they made the change from where they were in their career and they moved over and they didn't have a problem. And that's because, believe it or not, you work with data regularly. You do recognize the benefit of data. You do have experience perhaps in Excel or a spreadsheet. So it's really not difficult to make that career change and be very successful. I can say that I've seen many individuals from all walks of life be successful. So absolutely, without a doubt.
The most important, we started with networking, we will finish with networking, but referrals, that's what and how this world works right now.
Yes,
If you've proven your skills, we will be happy to refer you. And
absolutely.
as you can see, LinkedIn worth it.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I will say this, that there are some times where, depending on the nature of the job, they want something on letterhead from your instructor, right? I have no problem doing that. And, referring people, uh, you find out an opportunity, you refer people. By having that collective community, we all can be aware of what's out there and we can share that with each other. So I think that's important. The other thing is, we do post regularly job opportunities that we find out, right, Yulia? So that's something that when we hear of an opportunity and we see, a match with someone, we say, hey, we found this job opportunity. So that's the other thing is, it becomes very viral when we work together. I think that's a great benefit of being part of OpenHub, is that you have that connection.
Collaboration
Yes.
detected, and definitely that's what we do. I'm like professional matchmaker
Yeah,
in this field, and that's my mission, I shall say. I do want to
absolutely.
see you successful because it's
Yes.
actually the reference for the Open Hub.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's exciting though. It's also very exciting to see people grow and get to that next step. For me, as a professor, I've been a professor for 15 years, but I actually taught in corporate when I had my own business. I love nothing more than to see someone, go to the next level in their skill set.
Oh, yes.
And so for me, that is the most rewarding. So that's one of the reasons I left the industry and got back into education, was because I loved working with people and I loved helping them learn. So, and I learned from them as well, which is kind of nice. You know, we come from all walks of life, so that's kind of cool. All right, so let's talk about the bootcamp course topics. And again, if you have questions, don't hesitate to post them in the chat. And of course, if I miss one, Yulia, just let me know. All right, so there are 6 courses in the bootcamp. All right. Before I go into the specific courses, I'm going to have different, there's going to be slides for each one where we break it down. The time frame for the bootcamp is 26 weeks. Right. And each week there's going to be a 3-hour lecture that is recorded, that if you can't make the lecture, obviously, you know, work schedules and things of that nature sometimes interfere. Everything is recorded and uploaded so that you can watch the lecture. And like I said, office hours would be a great opportunity to ask questions about the content, perhaps get a demonstration if you're struggling with some concepts. So there's a 3-hour lecture, it's recorded, you can watch it later. And each week you will do 4 to 6 hours per week on quizzes and ongoing real world projects for homework. It's not graded homework, but it's a great way of assessing where your skills are at. So it's something that it's a challenge for you. It allows you to meet that challenge and then get an assessment as to where your knowledge is at. Let's say you're struggling with something. We can also identify what areas you're struggling in and perhaps get you additional help, which is very common. Sometimes, you know, content that you see doesn't make sense and you have to ask those questions. So it is intensive, it is hands-on, it is coding like a rock star. Okay. So it's, you know, there's very little theory. I will throw theory in there, but with the idea that you're applying the theory on the keyboard. So it's really, really important. The other thing we do is over the period of time that you're in the boot camp, you're building a GitHub portfolio as a resume. So I will show you how to push all of your projects to GitHub so that in an iterative fashion, you can actually update your resume. And when that employer says, give me your LinkedIn or give me a link to your GitHub portfolio, you have it. Okay. Now, that being said, as an analytics major, hands-on practice is key. That's right, Jordan. Here's the thing. When you are practicing using the keyboard and you're actually doing it, there's a high likelihood you're going to make mistakes, but that's how you learn. And so without practicing, you're never going to be able to, you know, really say to yourself, I'm at this level and I feel comfortable and confident. So practice is essential. All right. The lectures are live, and the hours of the day that these take place, what we would do is once a cohort does register for the boot camp, we will decide what days are conducive to everybody. So I think in the best instance, it's best to see who is attending boot camp, who has registered, and then sort of take a survey and see which is best. I'm very flexible, so if it takes evenings or, you know, weekends or what have you, we'll come up with a plan that meets the needs of everybody. I
And
think
I
that's
have to
really
add, if I
go
may.
ahead.
Yes, the pair programming or just collaborative projects is also the option. There are coding clubs OpenHub provides, and we can use this space to do so. Not physical space, but virtual space,
Yes.
definitely. So we do have the collaborative tools like Slack and Discord
Yep. Yep.
for your availability. So we can use those
Yep.
for just assigning the rooms, and you can practice together. Because
Absolutely.
togetherness, it's not necessarily you need a mentor. Sometimes you need just another pair of eyes.
Absolutely right. And another thing that I want to mention is that there will be a challenge for the cohort. So I will give you a data challenge and you will work together in small groups to address that data challenge. And there may even be prizes, okay? So, but I'm not going to tell you what, let's put it this way, there's swag, but I'm not going to tell you what kind of swag. How's that? All right. The best thing to do is learn using a challenge. And the challenges that I come up with are usually very, they're current given the times, and they're exciting. They're not like what you see on Kaggle or anywhere else. They're made by moi, and I try to make them fun. So I think you'll find them very enjoyable. All right. Okay, so let's go into each course because that's essential. All right. So the first course, you're basically going to learn how to get data from different sources and how to take that data, get a general understanding of that data, use a variety of different analytical techniques, univariate, bivariate analysis, basically do an assessment of the quality of the data that's in front of you. How is that done? Do a basic assessment of how bad the data is from a dirty data perspective. So are there anomalies? Let's recognize the data for patterns. How do we clean that data? How do we determine what we need to do with the data to get it to answer the questions or gain insight, right? So I'm going to show you a very awesome workflow on how to take that data set, work with several different data frames, and utilize those data frames for this specific data analysis based on goals. Also going to talk about different analytical algorithms that we typically use in data analytics and the stats behind it. And that is where knowing certain types of stats is important. So doing an ANOVA and a t-test or chi-square, what do those things mean and why would we do one or the other? Right? I'm going to break it down into very simple, non-technical terms from an empirical point of view. If we were doing a data science class, I would go right into the data science piece because I am that nerd. But in data analytics, we break it down into very meaningful, everyday language so that it makes perfect sense, okay? So we don't want any terminology to be mysterious or unusual. We want to truly understand it. And by applying those things to a real world data set that makes sense, you're able to then understand the concepts. The last thing is doing feature aggregation and sampling. So every feature which is in your data set has value. You have to decide, what value does the feature have? Is it relevant to my inquiry, or is it relevant maybe later on for a different inquiry? So we look at features, we look at whether or not they are essential or they can be put aside, and then how are we going to sample the data so that we can analyze it appropriately? And there's a decision process that you go through. Another thing that we do is scaling, which is part of the feature engineering and pre-processing. If you've got data of different weights, you can't just analyze that data and expect a result. You have to scale it so that everything is scalar to each other, right? So if you have salary next to age, right? Hopefully none of us are as old as our salary amount, because if we are, we have a problem. Right? But if we were to take that data and analyze it, it's going to skew because of your high salary relative to your low age, right? So I show you how to do that and how to change the dimensionality of your data set accordingly. So that's the first course. The second one continues that exploration in the data, but it takes it to the next step. At this point, you have cleaned your data. Your data is usable. It is probably numeric. We've taken any of the categorical data and we've made it numeric so that we can actually analyze it descriptively. So we'll do a variety of different things. We'll develop a model that we can utilize for this purpose of exploration. We'll also do things like plot and graph that data so that if we have a table of results, that's one way of looking at it. We can take that same information and put it into a visual form so that we can do like a heat map analysis and see concentrations or clusters, right? To see the nature of the data that we're working with. So for those of you that are visual, this is a good thing, but this is commonly done and commonly expected out there in the field. So we take the data exploration a little bit further. All right. We also talk about predictor variables and target variable, and what does that mean and why do we care? So that's another thing that we do in our data exploration as well. All right, next is Python. So we do a course in Python because Python is cool and everyone uses it. Well, Python is good and it's essential. It's a skill that they want you to know. So I walk you through how to get Python, how to import the libraries, how to import data from a variety of different areas and different locations, and how to use SQL to query those data sets. So taking data from a variety of different areas, muxing them together. Muxing is a telecommunications term, but merging them together into a useful form and then running a query to determine what insights are there based on that. So a lot of people will say to me, well, I don't know SQL. I've never done that. I have you in the palm of my hand. You'll be fine because I've been a SQL DBA and I've actually written uh, the Microsoft certification exam. Yes, these softwares are all free to download. So everything that we use is open source, costs no money. All right. So I'm going to show you what versions to get, where to get them. And again, none of it, I have all the software, I pay nothing, it's free, it's open source. That's a great thing when you are trying to learn, not to have to pay licenses and so on and so forth. So that's something I hope will be beneficial to you. The other thing I'm going to show you with Python is how to do different types of analysis. Python and R are very similar. I'm going to compare and contrast them. So we're going to perform analysis similarly between the two, but syntactically different. So semantically it's the same, logically it's the same, but syntactically it's different. And I'm going to show you some of those great workflow processes that automate the process. So that workflow to perform data analytics in Python is going to be very similar to how you do it in R, but you're going to decide what works best for you. So shortcuts, which are essential. All right, speaking of R, here's R, very similar. R has packages and libraries and so on and so forth. I'm going to show you how to get those packages from CRAN. CRAN is where a lot of those are stored. I'm also going to show you how to research the package so that if you want to understand better what this package will do for you, how do you make a semblance of what it does? And also how to contact the author. If you see a package that you like and has utility, they may ask you to be part of their project and to extend the package even further. So we're going to have those discussions as well. I'm going to show you how to use RStudio in particular as an integrated development environment so that you can run algorithms, develop models, and so on and so forth, and use SQL. So the workflow similarities between Python and R are very, very similar. You'll see nuances of difference, and then you'll decide which one you like better. In the field, you should know both. You really should know both. If you understand the methodology and then the semantic aspects, the logic, you can apply the syntax by learning it. So it's really essential. Of course, you'll have a favorite, right? You'll prefer one or the other, but that's okay. That's normal. That means you're normal like all programmers. Then I show you how to combine Python and R. All right. So you didn't know R was required if you know Python. So here's the thing, R is not required per se, but you will find employers that come to you and say, we have a client that only uses R. Can you help us? Right? Or you might have a client yourself and that person says, or that individual or organization says, we do R only. Just so that you know, R is used in education very commonly. So if you get into any research projects, you do anything in higher education, absolutely. If you know R, you can learn Python very quickly. The syntax is very similar, and it's really a nuance away. So absolutely. And again, I give you a lot of code to work with. I give you sample code and so on and so forth. I also give you access to a lot of resources that I have used over the years. So absolutely, you can learn R very fast if you know Python. Now, here's something that's uber cool. You can combine Python and R right in RStudio. So I show you how to use Anaconda, which is also a tool that is used in the industry. Very important to know. It is free. I show you how to set it up and how to integrate, create a Conda environment on your computer and add packages to it so that you can point to that environment, that virtual environment, and utilize it in an effective way. Okay, so let me give you an example. Let's say you decide you love Python, but you've got a client that wants you to do it in R. Well, you could combine Python and R together and do some of the productivity workflow that you're so used to, and you can then produce that content for your client, but you can then split the R piece out. You could actually separate them when you're done. So it allows you to work in one environment at a time and be very productive. So I show you how to actually marry the two together, but also how to use R Markdown and Shiny. R Markdown is for producing documentation and other types of printed works right from your code. And the shiny interface is used to develop web-based dashboards. All right, so iAttune says, I'm new to data analytics, but you have a background in demography and social statistics. That is fantastic. Can I get all I need to start a career in data analytics through the bootcamp? Absolutely. As someone who is a social scientist and someone who loves those types of pieces, keep in mind that every data set that you look at, there's demographics and social statistics, the psychodynamics, right? So you're always going to be looking at demographics of a customer. You're always going to be looking at human behavior. Those are social statistics. When you're analyzing consumer behavior or behavior of clients or patients or anything of that, the human element, those pieces are going to be essential. So having a background in that is going to be very important. Having a pure technology background is okay, but 9 times out of 10, you're going to be handling human-related data. And that's really important. So I'm glad you asked that question, and I hope I answered it for you. All right. Next is data visualization. Now, of course, once you analyze data and you develop those insights and you go to share those things with your stakeholders, you have to determine what is the most effective way to convey that information. So we talk about why would you choose one tool or the other? Believe it or not, Excel allows you to do some data analytics. And I'm going to show you how you can do data visualization in Excel and have a lot of insights gained from that same data set that you worked with in R and Python. Now, why do I say that? Well, there's going to be cases where you work with perhaps nonprofit organizations and they don't have any special software. They only have Excel. And you may need to serve that community because that's important to you. So, and I worked on one recently for, helping people in the local community get food for the pandemic because there was a lot of people that were struggling, right, because of the change in employment and what have you. So I actually did a project where we just used Excel because that's all they had and that's all they understood. But we were able to derive insights and very powerful insights. So that's why Excel is part of this puzzle. Tableau and Power BI, and of course RStudio, all of those pieces, all of those software can create data visualizations. So we talk about which ones are the best choices, which ones give you the wow factor, right? There is a row limitation in Excel. Now, if let's say you come up to that row limitation, what I do is I then take you to SQL Server. All right, and I show you how to get around that. So thank you, Darren. That's awesome. So as many of you may know, Excel is not designed to be, excuse me, a relational database. It has limits, right? So once you reach that limit, you have a problem. So that's when you make the decision to go into SQL Server. So I'm going to show you how to do that. We're going to work with SQL Server Express. It's free, Community Edition. And I'm going to show you how to point Power BI or Tableau, even Excel, to the SQL Server and say, get my data from over here. All right. Now, again, if you have a row limitation, you wouldn't be able to do that with Excel all the time. But Tableau and Power BI can, and so can RStudio. So that's a great question. Thank you so much for asking. You always come up to plateaus of constraint with technology. And the best thing to do is understand, now that I have that plateau, what's my decision? Where do I go? And then make a recommendation, right? So depending on if you're working for clients or you're working for your boss who comes to you and says, I don't know what to do. We've reached this threshold of constraint. By availing yourself to all the possibilities, you can make recommendations based on your knowledge. And that's important. So that's why we do all these different tools in this one boot camp. All right. But it's a lot of fun. And I think you'll find it rewarding. One of the most important things in this course is learning how to interpret the data, but also report the findings. I will tell you that there's a lot of organizations out there that have data that they don't know what that data means. They don't know how to interpret it. And that data could save their organization. It could help them get to the next level, or it could keep that organization afloat. So you being able to interpret it and then report it to stakeholders like people in the board of directors or people in the community or what have you is an essential skill. I'm going to show you how to do that and to make a semblance of the data. We'll actually do it as a group as well. So everyone has different perspectives. So we'll find out what's your perspective and then we'll talk about it. All right, besides, we have another question. Besides data software experience, what other skills are employers looking for in an entry-level data position? Okay, so a few slides prior, we talked about, math skills. We talked about pattern recognition. Being able to determine that there's anomalies in the data is important. One or two errors in the data could compromise your ability to gain insight. And a lot of people might say, well, that's just a few errors. A lot of people don't pick up on those things until they get someone who has an eye for the data. So these are skills that are really essential for the employer. They are looking for people that have a tolerance for poring over data for hours. Right, to determine the nature of what the data is. The other thing that's important is working with other individuals in groups. And some people aren't comfortable working in groups, but it's essential to learn how to work with teams, whether it's a small team or a large team. So we talk about some of the group dynamics and we talk about ways to approach projects to be efficient in those projects. And then we talk about, the reality of working with people on these types of projects. It can be frustrating, it can be stressful, right? So how do we turn our responses into different challenges into positive outcomes for ourselves as people and for the totality of the group? All right. The worst thing that could happen is that you get so frustrated you decide this is not for me. It's essential that you understand exactly what's happening in the process of doing the project. I will say this: I have noticed over the years, and I've been teaching technology for over 25 years. When someone makes a mistake on the keyboard, they think it's something wrong with them, and it's never something wrong. It's a fact that you are human and you made a mistake. It's that simple. Now, as someone in the field of technology, that mistake could be expensive for the organization. So the goal is to learn from the mistakes in a safe environment like the boot camp, so that you don't, crash the stock market on your first iteration of doing data analytics. Right. So obviously, we have to be careful, but it's you have to be forgiving with yourself and realize that learning is a process, and that we're all learning regardless of our foundation. All right. I guess I covered it. All right, so that was a lot of talking, very fast, and I hope I didn't go too fast. But I guess what we'll do is we'll take questions from people and see what questions I can answer for you. Yes, we will be doing machine learning. Yes, so thank you for that question. Machine learning is part of predictive analytics. So when I said predictive, you can assume machine learning. Yes, we will, and all different dynamics. So we'll focus on a retail example, a health related example, a finance related example. So yes, absolutely. All right, awesome.
Woohoo!
Jack, thank you so much. Thank you. And Estes, thank you so much. Awesome. Yeah. Machine learning and AI. Absolutely. So some of you might be wondering, well, what is machine learning and AI? It's not robots. Oh, yes, robots use AI, just so you know, but you actually can do a chat bot in Python that responds when someone comes to a website, and that uses AI. Based on what they typed on a keyboard, you have to interpret what they mean. That's AI, right? Machine learning is teaching the machine to learn from a data set. And once that model, for example, how do we know a specific individual will get COVID? Well, we can look at variables related to individuals that get COVID, train the model, and then say, here's a new data set. Tell me which individuals are likely to get COVID. How important that is for people nowadays, right? So that's a very quick example, but yeah. All right. Any other questions?
It's time to unmute yourself. Feel free to do so.
Yes. Is RPA useful? Absolutely. So unfortunately, in this boot camp, we wouldn't touch on RPA, but I will tell you that that would warrant having a complete boot camp just for that robotics processing. All right. Robotics processing analysis is very similar to the programming that you're going to be doing in here, you're developing models and you're developing logic to be able to handle and automate processes, right? So the skills you learn in here, you could use for RPA. Okay, but unfortunately, to add that into this would be probably too confusing for most people. Robotics processing is basically you're automating something that is repetitive. And so an organization can pay an individual to repeat certain tasks over time, or we can train the machine using robotic processing automation to automatically take over and do the process for us. Yes, linear and logistic, absolutely. Yes, linear regression and logistic regression are essential to the process of the algorithms that we're working with, most definitely. Of course, one is used for continuous, the other is used for discrete, but we'll talk about the differences. That's okay, that's all right. These are great questions. Thank you, folks. That is wonderful. So these are a lot of things that you might find confusing at the moment. We would cover all of those things. All right, that's essential.
Let me, oops, am I sharing screen?
You are.
What I'm sharing? Why? Why?
You're
Oh,
sharing OpenHub.
okay.
I'm no longer sharing. I hope I'm not sharing.
Too
What am
many
I
windows
sharing?
open. Okay.
Yeah.
I do want to bring your attention to where you can see all these source materials because Cynthia did an amazing job. Thank you so much. But you do need to review it later. So I'm putting the link again into the chat
Hmm.
and how it works. Yes, definitely. This is the entire data analytics bootcamp, and you can just use this accordion to learn more about each class. And if you click on those titles, you can expand it and
Hmm.
see more. What we are actually excited about, it's not know-how for sure, but we're using a modular approach. So if you feel it's kind of you can jump in the middle of this, feel free to do so. If you will start and feel it's not your thing, again, even module 1 will be such a value for you. You can apply it for your career wherever and
Hmm.
whenever you would need it, because you will get the major concepts there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how do you inquiry? You can see there is a forum here. We're using this forum on my screen on the right next to this, or just feel free to reach out to me as well.
Hmm.
Let's connect on LinkedIn, as I said. Let's ask me any questions if you have, or ask Cynthia any questions,
Hmm.
whatever you can have.
Hmm.
I'm putting my email into the chat.
Yeah.
Really open
The
Hub
one thing
project.
I do want to mention, Yulia, which I
Mhm.
don't know if I did mention, is if you do jump into like the third course, let's say you skip over one or two, what
Mhm.
have you, they are linear in their progression. So right, so we take a project from start to finish. We continue iterating on the project. So
That's the beauty of it. For those who
right,
know already foundation, this will be
right,
just the journey which you can report as your
right, right. So,
reference.
so if someone were to jump into, let's say, the Python course, they would get the starter code from that point forward. All right, so the foundation has already been established. The pre-processing has been done. The exploratory has been done. It's already in the code, and we're working from that point forward. So it is very easy to jump in where you feel it's essential. Yeah,
So please don't be scary by price, but I shall say this is one of the cheapest price in the market.
yeah,
And we are proud to have such amazing Cynthia who is delivering way more than, than it's actually people
yeah,
uh, can expect
yeah,
out
yeah.
of the course. But it's really solid. Another uh, another value, I shall say,
Hmm.
we're offering as soon as you are taking certain bootcamps with OpenHub, you are entitled to take it second time for free.
Yeah.
And we are offering the teaching assistance opportunities as well for the third
Hmm.
time or the second or third time if you feel you're capable to do so. And this is one of the best ways actually to get your internship, right? Your hands-on or just a reference point, and you can
Hmm.
report it as your career. So you're skipping the step of the junior developer because that's where
Yes.
another challenge lays.
Yeah. Another thing I thought I'd mention is I'm currently working with doctoral students on their dissertation, and all of these skills are in the program taught by me, and also I'm their chair for their dissertation. So this is really a value added. No, you don't get a higher education degree, but you get the skills to go right into the workforce. So I just thought I'd mention that it's essential, to think about that.
I guess I'm still screen sharing, right?
Yeah, well, I can see your screen.
So if you click on bootcamps, you can see other bootcamps available. And I shall mention another bootcamp, which it's not real bootcamp because it's only free classes. But Cynthia offered this for small businesses because we all understand small business struggles, especially during pandemic with digital transformation. And that's our donation to them with free classes.
Mhm.
Cynthia, would you like to address this bootcamp?
Absolutely. So this is geared to the goals and needs of a small business. And what we did is we focus very heavily on, how do we understand our customer now that COVID has hit? How do we make decisions to change our focus so that we can still remain in business, meet the needs of our customer? How can we best assess where they're at? So in this particular course, we do everything in Excel, and I show how to do, customer analysis, customer analytics for the purposes of helping the small business. So understanding, the marketing mix that I need to be providing, understanding market basket analysis, what do customers tend to buy when they buy something, what do they add to their cart, how to do recommendations, and how to do customer segmentation. So group customers into like kinds so that we can better serve their needs as a small business. So that's another one.
Let's address a little bit more logistics, how it looks like and what's the deadline. So you can see the calendar on the right. There are other things happening, but the Data Analytics Bootcamp, it's so far it's scheduled and you
For
can see all
March,
the
yeah?
dates. Yes, you can see all the dates here. When you click on the specific course, you can see all dates listed here.
Yeah.
Right, so we're hoping to start March 3rd. It means the application deadline shall be no later than February
Hmm.
22nd, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah. And I believe there's a minimum of 5 students, Julia. Am I right?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, yes,
So, and I think the other thing is if there's a group of individuals that can't start until a certain date, I'm sure that we could assist them, and have rolling starts if that works.
correct.
Yeah.
Do we have any more questions? So just the agenda is delivered. Now it's your show, guys.
Uh-uh. So Mark, did I answer your question about the data for small business cover? I just saw your question. I just want to make sure I did answer everything. So it's really okay. Wonderful, wonderful, good.
So any logistical
There is
questions?
there is a question, Yulia, about payment plans.
Yes, we do not work with any lenders or banks, but we can just create your own schedule.
Hmm.
Something like first course has to be prepaid at 50% to start, and we will go from
Hmm.
there.
Yeah, 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 and I think if you're looking for some type of flexible options or what have you, I think it's best to contact Yulia directly, and maybe something can be created that works with your plan, because we do understand that everyone has budgets and such. Even though you're not a small business per se, you might be someone who needs to manage their finances. It's essential.
I shall explain a little bit why OpenHub, why we do what we do, right? And why we're trying to bring real practitioners to the field to teach it, because we truly believe colleges are not catching up with the trends, and
That's
you do need to have hands-on on real practice, real projects, which will be actually you will be multiplying it as soon as you will get hired, and you will bring your portfolio of what you have done with Cynthia. You actually can apply it again and again in your daily
Mhm.
routine. It will be such an asset itself for your employer. So that's the approach coming from real practitioners experience and best practices,
Mhm.
right? Bringing best of the best from practitioners to practitioners, because we want you through few months to gain the rapid reskilling.
Yeah. Absolutely.